Hello everyone, today I'm going to talk about Pokemon Red and Blue, or Pokemon Generation 1. Before I talk about this though, let me give you a backstory. In 1990, after seeing games such as Saga, or as it's known in America, Final Fantasy Legend for the Game Boy, Satoshi Tarji, after seeing stuff like that, and seeing the link cable and gain an idea of bugs going across the link cable because he was obsessed with bug collecting when he was a kid, he made a game called Pokemon Red and Blue. Red and Green, as it's known in Japan. After a long, protracted development process which took about 6 years, I'm serious, this game started developed in 1990, finally came out in 1996. When it finally came out, it was all buggy, because for several reasons, including the engine was broken-ish, and the fact that one of the people making it thought it was a good idea to put Mew in the game, even though all the debug tools were out. The game came out, and despite the fact that it was pretty primitive, and the drawings of the Pokemon looked horrid, it sold a shit ton. It was popular enough to have its own anime, and then it was brought to the US as Pokemon Red and Blue, based on the Japanese third version, which never came to America. Yes, they made a third version called Pokemon Blue, which was exactly the same as Red and Green, which was barely bug fixed, but it did have some slightly better drawn Pokemon. Eventually they made Pokemon Yellow to capitalize on the success of the anime that was becoming pretty popular. All three were pretty glitchy though, and had the same basic issues. So I'm going to talk about all three of them, but the version I'm going to be specifically reviewing is Blue version. And one more thing before I start this. Just so you're aware, the Pokemon mechanic wasn't new. While Pokemon Red and Blue had this unique mechanic where you had to catch them all by catching only certain Pokemon and using the link cable and doing multiplayer battles, the main mechanics weren't really original. There were games such as Final Fantasy Legend, which you could have a whole team of characters which you could pick, and Shin Megami Tensei, where you could basically recruit other monsters to join your party, similar to Pokemon, which came out years before, around the same time as Pokemon when it started development. But now for the footage. So Pokemon Red and Blue are pretty much the same game. Same with Yellow, other than there's one key difference. The key difference is the Pokemon you could catch. Pokemon Blue, Red, Green, and Yellow each had different Pokemon you could catch. There were many of the same, but there were some that were unavailable on others. For example, Pokemon Yellow, you couldn't get Raichu because some bullshit restriction trying to tie the TV show into the anime where you couldn't use a Thunderstone on your own Pikachu. You also couldn't catch certain Pokemon in Blue because they wouldn't appear in the wild, and you're not allowed to steal trainers' Pokemon either. In fact, there's only one Pokemon game in the series where you can steal trainers' Pokemon, but that's another story. But basically, how the game works is, you pick a name, you give your rival a name, you're always supposed to pick something stupid for the name. Unlike other RPGs, where they had plots and stuff, Pokemon didn't really have much of a plot. The main point of the game, beat the Elite Four, beat the gym leader, and then catch them all. You could catch them all, but it takes a ton of time, doesn't really give you anything, and of course, you'd have to use the other Game Boy. And plus, you couldn't catch certain Pokemon officially, like Mew. And we all know how Mew was. If you played any newer Pokemon game, you can tell how primitive Generation 1 is. Just because it started everything doesn't mean it's aged horribly. You can't give Pokemon items, you can't map the select button, you can't, your item bag is extremely tiny, you'll be dropping stuff into your PC all the time, and before you go into certain places, you might have to dump all your items. There's no bags, and the graphics seem pretty primitive, especially compared to the games that came after this, like Gold and Silver, which could also run on an original Game Boy. As you can see, the whole game looks and feels pretty primitive. And as you can see, There's also no real coloring either, and I'm using a Super Game Boy. If you're using a Game Boy Color, you won't get any color or any of that shit. You'll have to push buttons and have the game give you a color. But enough for the technical talk. When you start the game, you can also see how unbalanced it is. Pick Squirtle and then teach it Ice Beam, and you can instantly obliterate everything. The rivals Pokemon and all that shit, and if you have a ton of revives, you'll never ever die. Ever. The music also sounds more primitive too, and did I mention you can't ever do certain things such as, well, you know how in Pokemon Generation 2, you can give Pokemon items? You can't do that either, so it's pretty primitive. And of course, trades are pretty primitive too. Pokemon send each other out one at a time instead of both, so the trades can take a while. Unlike in Generation 3 and newer. Did I mention the game is glitchy as hell? Because of the way the game is coded, there are tons of glitch Pokemon. There's about 400 missing number variants. There's, literally a ton of other glitches. There's cross-region trading. There's Glitch City. There's the Mew glitch where you can get Mew and any Pokemon in the game. That is how glitchy this game is. And if you use a Game Shark and put in random memory addresses with hex code and stuff, you can get even crazier glitches. I'm serious. This game is really glitchy. If this game came out today, there would be controversy. People would be saying, this game is glitchy. I paid $60 for this. I'm serious. That's how glitchy this game is. Now, of course, many of the glitches have to be triggered, but, well, they shouldn't even be there in the first place. I mean, come on, considering how newer Pokemons have Wi-Fi and stuff, if they did that today, there would be a ton of banning and stuff, and I guarantee there would be a patch. Similar to how 360 games can have title updates. There's also fewer types, and many move effectivenesses are different too, because the Dark type and, well, the Dark type and the Steel type didn't exist yet, so if you have the Psychic type Pokemon, it's really unbalanced. I mean, it's just so unbalanced, and especially if you do this with multiplayer, it's not that balanced either. There are other games, too, made, such as Pokemon Stadium to take advantage of the multiplayer feature, but the thing is, the multiplayer in this game wasn't really that balanced. I mean, let's face it, when you play a multiplayer game, you don't really... I mean, come on, Pokemon's not that balanced in the first place, but if you're taking it seriously, there are more competitive games. In the end, however, the main problem with this game is, it's just aged horribly. The fact is, there's newer Pokemon games out, that are better, and they even made Fire Red Leaf Green, which is basically this game, but with many of the problems from the first one fixed. There's no glitches, there's none of that stuff. The graphics look better, and just look at those fucking sprites. Squirtle's all pixelated in the back, even though Pokemon weren't pixelated in Generation 2. And just look at that Pidgey, he's just fucking staring there. Half the sprites in this game are poorly drawn. I mean, seriously. In the end, this game's just aged horribly. Fire Red Leaf Green are better games, they're faster paced. You can run through the whole game, you can map stuff to the select button. It's just, in the end, it's better. And you should buy Fire Red Leaf Green instead of this game, or even emulate it, because even if you're emulating the games, like a paperweight could probably run Fire Red Leaf Green. I'm serious. And you can't use the console juice because Pokemon Gold and Silver ran on the Game Boy too and had many more features, from a day and night cycle to the fact that, well, you know Pokemon, you could give Pokemon hold items, you could map stuff to the select button. All in all, Generation 2 is a lot more playable than this. Even though it's on the same system, this game just hasn't aged that well. It's just not that good. And about Yellow, well, not only that, but, well, Yellow is the exact same game, literally. The only difference is they put some NPCs to make it feel more like the anime. And did I mention that there's literally no post-game content, just catch Mewtwo and that's it. Possibly the worst thing, though, is the fact that now Pokemon isn't even improving like it did in Gen 2 or 3, or even 4. Black and White only had triple battles, and there was literally only one triple battle in the entire game. And post-game content, there's barely anything. And did I mention they tried to force an all-dramatic plot on it, except the plot was terrible? In the end, the Pokemon franchise is dying again. They could be improving on the games, and maybe if they actually put effort into improving them, they could be good. If they actually improved, well, if they didn't improve, we'd still be stuck at Generation 1, and the newest game on the 3DS would be look like Generation 3, but be like Generation 1 gameplay-wise, and that's what's sadly happening to Pokemon. In the end, Generation 1 has just aged horribly. Maybe it was influential in 1998 or 1996, but in 2012 or 2013 or whatever, this game just hasn't aged that well. Don't buy it, save your money. There's better games that have been released since then, or even before this game. All in all, don't buy this.